Hello and welcome to another video. And about a month ago I got my testosterone levels tested and the results were lower than I expected. So my test score came back at 11.5 nanomoles per litre, which is at the lower end of the normal range, and I was a little bit surprised, I was a little bit confused about the result, and so it prompted me to do two things. Firstly, I spent a lot of time doing research into test levels, and secondly, I got my testosterone retested, so I went for a little bit of a more kind of detailed, in-depth test. So in today's video, I'm going to reveal the results of my latest testosterone test. I'm also going to give you some examples of some other people's test scores, and then I'm going to talk about the significance of those numbers. So if you're excited to find out how I'm faring in my quest to become more of a man, drop this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let's go. Okay, we're in. So first things first, let's talk about the test that I just got done. So for those of you that have seen my last video on testosterone, the one I made about 4 weeks or so ago, you'll be familiar with the test that I got done. For those of you that are new that haven't seen that, I'll quickly explain it because I got it done with the same company in the same way. So it's a company called Let's Get Checked. They're like an online company. Basically what you do is you go on their website, you request a particular test, they send you out a test kit, which is like a little box that contains everything you need. You take a blood sample, you put it in a little like sealed vial thingy, you put that inside an envelope and you send it back to them, and then within 5 days your test result is available online. If you don't understand it or you have any more questions or you want to get some more information about it, you can request a phone call from one of their nurses, and they're super helpful, super convenient. It's just like a really good way to find out, various things about your health. As well as like the testosterone test, they have like things on general health like your heart, your kidneys, your liver and stuff, to like STD checks, even to like cancer screening. So it's really cool, it's really useful, it's really interesting. So what I will do is I'll put a link to their website at the top of my description. If you want to go and check them out, which I definitely recommend you do, then feel free to go and do that. Anyway, the test result, let's talk about it. So, like I said, last time around I came out at 11.5 nanomoles per litre. This time around, for my main test score, I came out at 17.5 nanomoles per litre. So, still in the normal range, still towards the lower side, but this time around 17.5 puts me much closer to the middle, almost kind of in the middle of the normal range. So, I'm not gonna lie, on like a petty level, I do feel a lot better about myself. Now, like I said, it was a more detailed test this time around, so I actually got 3 results. So as well as the overall test score, I also got a score for my SHBG, which is sex hormone binding globulin. I mean, it's got the word sex in it, so it's got to be important, right? My score for that was 43 nanomoles per litre, which is still in the normal range, but this time slightly more towards the higher end of the normal range. And then finally, I got a result for my free androgen, which is basically how much testosterone in your body is actually usable, so it's quite an important one. And for this, I scored 40.7, which again is in the normal range, but slightly towards the lower end of the normal range. Now, going back to the main test score, the one that I can compare to the one that I did last time, if you do make a comparison between those two tests, you can see that this time around it's pretty significantly higher. So the first time it was 11.5 nanomoles per litre, this time around 17.5. So yeah, I mean, that's quite a big increase. Now, I mean, I guess on the one hand that's quite strange because obviously the tests were only like 4 weeks apart. My lifestyle was basically the same, from the first test to the second test. However, I did do a couple of things differently. So first time around, I took the test at about 11:30 in the morning. I'd already had a pretty substantial breakfast and I'd already been doing some bits, right? The second time around, I took it literally straight away from waking up. So probably about 7:30, 8 in the morning. Obviously I was fasted. I'd just been sleeping all night, So it goes to show that your testosterone level score can be acutely affected, pretty significantly by just those simple things. Just a case of being fasted versus eating food and time of the day. I mean, lots of research has already backed it up. It's very clear that your test score, your testosterone level does fluctuate quite a lot throughout the course of the day. So first thing in the morning, it will be significantly higher than it will be, say, last thing in the evening before you go to bed. Okay, so we've established the reason for the discrepancy between the result in the first test and the result in the second test, but still looking at the result, it's still, lower than I would expect it to be. I'm still slightly towards the lower end of that normal range, although it is in the normal range. But I feel like, I have lots of the traits that you would associate with someone that would have higher levels of tests. So it is still a little bit confusing. So like I said, I did a lot of research into test levels, and I've basically found 2 big reasons as to why my test will be lower than expected. So there are 2 significant factors that impact, on an acute level and also just generally your test level. The first one being a level of body fat, right? So basically, lots of studies have shown that people that go for a sustained period of like losing body fat, there will be an associated drop in testosterone. So basically, as their body fat drops down, their test levels will also drop down in hand with that. So basically, being on a cut, right? And that leads on to the second part, which is basically not necessarily being in a calorie deficit, but just reducing your calories over a period of time. So again, people that reduce their calories over a period of time, there tends to be a correlation there whereby their testosterone level will also drop simultaneously. And that makes sense, right? Because over the last, I guess, 6 months, although not deliberately, I have basically been cutting. Like I've gone from about 95, 96 kilos down to where I am now, which is hovering around 93 kilos. So that's a reasonably significant drop in body weight. And then additionally, I have obviously been eating a lot less. Like going back to when I was bulking, I was on say 6,000 calories a day. I mean, I'd be interested to see what my test levels were back then, but that's another topic. Yeah, I went down to about 5k maintenance. I'm now probably eating anywhere from 4 to 5k, but I'd say as an average, if you look at my week by week compared to where I was 6 months ago, I'm definitely eating significantly less food, which again would make sense in terms of my test level being lower than expected. To add more weight to this theory, I have a couple of case studies from some other YouTubers / friends / in some cases intimate passionate lovers. The first one being Joe Delaney. Now Joe is a shredded dude, like he spends a lot of his time looking very lean, and he did a testosterone test a while back now, coming off the end of a cut, and his score was 12.5 nanomoles per litre, which again, just like mine, is the lower half, like towards the lower end of that normal range. And again, on the surface, that's quite surprising, right? Because he has a lot of muscle mass, he looks good, he's, like I said, he's lean, he's shredded. You would associate him with having higher tests, but it wasn't. It was, like I said, towards that lower end of the normal range. But again, that backs up that theory, that ties in with that theory, in the sense that he had just finished a long cut, so that's a sustained period of being on a lower number of calories, plus obviously would have been sitting at a very low body fat percentage. But you could argue, and to be fair, you'd be completely right in doing so, that in itself isn't actually compelling evidence, right? Because ultimately, both mine and Joe's test levels were taken when we were already quite lean, we'd already been on a lower number of calories for a sustained period of time. It could just be coincidence, right? Like who's to say that when we were in a bulk, our test level wouldn't be low as well? To get some real conclusive evidence, what you'd need is a test level taken when you were in a cut versus a test level taken when you were in a bulk, right? Well, never fear. Rob Lipsett, like a short Irish Batman, is here to save the day. So Rob has actually had 2 test scores taken in the past. His first one was done when it was at the end of a bodybuilding prep, right? So he's prepping, he was getting ready for a bodybuilding show. His body fat was very, very low. He was eating a very low, comparatively very low number of calories, and his test level came back at 9 nanomoles per litre. Now that's very low, that's below the average range. That's actually considered low testosterone, right? But it's weird because you look at pictures of him, he looks shredded, he looks sick, so to the average person, that'll be surprising, right? But here's where the real conclusive, here's where the real interesting stuff comes. And like I said, backs up my theory, or the theory. So more recently, he got another test done. Now this time round, he had been bulking for a bit, so he was on a high number of calories. He had a significantly higher amount of body fat, and his test came back at 27.2 nanomoles per litre. So that's a significant increase, and like I said, it just adds more weight to that theory that basically, if you go from having more body fat to having lower body fat, and you go from eating more calories to eating less calories, your testosterone level is gonna drop. Now that's pretty compelling evidence, right? But in case you are outrageously stubborn and you need some more convincing, I read another study, a case study on a bodybuilder. They followed him over a 12-month prep, right? So he's getting ready for a bodybuilding show over the course of a year. Now, over the course of that year, they were testing his testosterone, right? As he was training and eating and stuff. His calorie intake went from something like 4,500 calories a day down to around 2,000 calories a day by the end of the prep. His body fat percentage went from, like, I think it was 14.5% down to around 5%, and his test levels dropped by 77%, right? That's a friggin' incredible drop in test, and you can see quite clearly there is a link there between a reduction in body fat percentage, a reduction in calories consumed, and then a reduction in your level of testosterone. It's also worth noting that lots of studies have found links between overtraining and lower levels of test. So in case you're unaware, overtraining is basically where you train so much that your training performance starts to deteriorate. And yeah, researchers have found that overtraining can lead to lower test scores, and that kind of ties in with the cutting thing, because when you're cutting, particularly when you get towards the end of a cut, particularly if you're prepping for a show, because you are struggling, because you're on a lower number of calories, training is going to be a lot harder. It is also worth noting that when it comes to body fat percentage, although like I've said, research shows that as your body fat percentage goes lower down to those extreme levels, your test level can also drop. Going the other way, so like increasing your body fat percentage could lead to increased levels of test, there is a limit to that, you know, because lots of studies have also shown, as I highlighted in the last video on this, that when your body fat percentage is really high, that is actually ironically linked to lower levels of test. So it's almost like there's a kind of safe zone. You're like, when you get super shredded, your test levels go down. When you get really fat, your test levels goes down. There's kind of like a happy medium, you know. Now you might be sitting there thinking, well, you know, that's great. We now know some things that adversely affect your testosterone levels, and you know, you're an incredibly attractive man, but how does this actually help us? What is the significance of this? Well, if we know factors that negatively impact your testosterone levels, then by definition we also know how we can increase our testosterone levels. So here we go, Matt's top 5 tips to naturally increase your testosterone. So tip number 1 is going to be eat more food, right? Increase your caloric intake and your test levels are going to go through the roof. Tip number 2 is going to be don't be too lean, you know, get a little bit fatter. Again, your test levels are going up. Tip number 3, do not overtrain. Basically train really easy and you're on to a winner. Tip number 4 is fasted. Be fasted, don't eat any food, test levels are going up. And tip number 5 is gonna be, just be the morning. Just be in the morning. Jokes, obviously I'm joking. I would have hoped you ascertained that by now. But yeah, I think the moral of the story is basically like, just don't worry about it too much. Like, don't read into it unless you are eliciting like symptoms of low test. Just don't worry about your test score. You know, I think because it can as I've shown, it can fluctuate so much, like on an acute basis and also on a kind of a longer term basis, and so many things affect it. I don't think, unless your test is super low or super high, it is that good an indicator, you know, of much. Basically, I guess, I mean, you could argue, I guess you could use it maybe as a measurement of overtraining. So maybe if you got your test score done and your test level was really low, maybe you could maybe think, right, you know, I'm training too hard, I'm going to ease off a little bit. Maybe you could use it as an indicator of your cut having gone on too long. Like if you're super shredded and your test is really, really low, maybe it might be a time to kind of hop onto into maintenance or into a bulk. Maybe that isn't a good long-term way to be in terms of health. But generally speaking, like I said, because test levels do fluctuate so much, unless you're going to get them done, you know, on yourself throughout the year to have a comparison, I don't think it's worth reading into it too much. I don't think it really warrants worrying about. And on that note, I'm going to end the video. So I sincerely hope you enjoyed it, guys. If you have enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Like I said at the start, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'm now going to go and sit in my bedroom for the next 6 months, do nothing apart from eat 20,000 calories every day. So the next time I get my testosterone tested, my levels will be so high, the machine will explode, everyone in the lab will die, and then their corpses will come back to life because there'll be so much test floating around in the air. Bye.